Sisters of Life, and she's speaking of a charism of life. And I was looking again at some little notes that I had made earlier, and I think what the Sisters of Life do, and the charism of that order, is in direct conflict with a secular society. They are the opposite of what is being peddled to you, to me, and to people throughout this sad and sorry world of ours. Particularly in recent times, I have noticed in the United States of America. Those people are going through dreadful times. Just look at some of the words that are used on page 5 in relation to an introduction to the Sisters of Life. Towards the bottom, they bring a consoling presence of Jesus Christ to every person they meet, especially those whose lives are hidden, vulnerable, or wounded. You go on in the next line, and it says, they are caring, they are fostering, they are inviting, they are running retreat works, and they are upholding the beauty of marriage and family life, a matter about which we heard only a moment ago. This decision that's going to be made by politicians on your behalf and mine that will change the direction and the morality of this country for more years ahead than I care to think about. I think that these ladies are a godsend to us, and I have the greatest of pleasure in introducing Sister Veronica Mary.
That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. It is a privilege for myself and for my sisters to be here in New Zealand. We have an absolutely beautiful country and beautiful people, and we're getting acclimated to the time change slowly, but it's been a magnificent experience, so I'm grateful and thank you to everyone. This afternoon, I have the great privilege of introducing you to the charism of life, which many of you know and live already without perhaps articulating it as such. The charism of life is the soul of our community, the Sisters of Life. And the word charism comes from the Greek, meaning favor or gratuitous gift. Before we look at the gift itself, I think it's important to note where the gift comes from, where the source of the gift comes from, and we know that to be the Holy Spirit. We look deep into the mystery of the most holy Trinity, God the Father pouring himself out into the heart of the Son receiving the gift of the Father's love perfectly and returning it back, holding nothing back. And that love is so perfect and so intense that that's the third person of the Holy Trinity, the Holy Spirit. It is key to understand that this gift, this charism, comes from the Holy Spirit, which is love. This gift of the charism is given for a purpose, this gift of love poured out, and that is to build up the church and to meet a particular need of the day. Cardinal O'Connor, who founded our community, the Sisters of Life, in New York in 1991, names our charism, the charism of life, and he defines it this way. He said to us, your charism is for the protection, the preservation, the advancement, the enhancement of human life, a recovery for our culture and for the entire world today of a sense of the sacred and reverence for every person made in the image of God. As Sisters of Life, we receive this charism, this gift, and we vow ourselves to our charism to protect and enhance the sacredness of human life. In our constitutions, it reads this: by means of the fourth vow, All the sisters' prayer and activity are offered to the Lord so that the life of every person, especially the most vulnerable, will be protected and prized as an icon of the living God. It has everything to do with who we are, not what we do. Our charism, this charism of life, colors and shapes everything that we do: our contemplation, our spirituality, our apostolates, our communal life, and even the way we live out the 3 traditional vows, which we also take, those of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Cardinal O'Connor was a leading voice within the church. You may have heard of him, for the building up of the culture of life and for the promotion of the sacredness of all human life in the United States. He would use the pulpit of St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue in New York City and make it known over and over that any woman without reserve from anywhere and under any circumstances who found herself pregnant and alone and in need could come to him in the Archdiocese of New York, and she would be taken care of. As the years went on, he recognized that while individuals were working so hard, and the truth was certainly on our side, there was an apparent lack of progress in converting hearts and minds to the truth about life. He took all of this to prayer, and he began praying with the 9th chapter of the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus is coming down the mountain after the Transfiguration. And he finds his disciples, I think you remember the story, very frustrated because they could not cast out a particular demon from a young boy. And so he himself cast the demon out from the boy. And later on, when they were alone with him, the disciples said, "Lord, why is it that we were not able to cast that demon out?" And the Lord said, "This kind of demon can only be cast out by prayer and fasting." For him, for Cardinal O'Connor, this was a life-transforming grace and gave him insight into what was needed in order to make some progress in building a culture of life. He also realized that this grace was not a personal one, but one for the whole church. He had identified contempt for human life as a demon that could only be driven out by prayer and fasting. And what did he do with this grace? Now, this is before he founded our community, but with this grace, he put an ad in Catholic New York, and he had prayed about this very much, and he thought that the Lord was asking him to found a religious community, and he felt that this was the definitive grace. And so he put an ad in Catholic New York saying, "Help wanted, sisters of life." And much to his, as he would say, he was 70 years old at the time he founded the community, he was quite, he didn't really despair, but he was a little desperate when he saw that so many women wrote to him and said, "I'm interested." He said, "Oh no, now I have to do something about that." And here we were, who loved us very much, and we adored him. The Cardinal recognized that in this charism of life, something very different had to happen that wasn't pro-life activism, so to speak. He recognized the need, and remember, charism comes from the Holy Spirit. He recognized the need for a new Pentecost in the pro-life movement. He would say, "The battle cannot be won by human means or our own efforts alone, but by the supernatural. There are lots of things we need to do and should do, but the doing alone will never convert hearts and minds. We must allow our own hearts to be converted first, opening ourselves in loving surrender to Christ, and then we can allow him to radiate through us, to flow through us, his Spirit, his mercy, his love. And because by him and through him all things are done." We tend to think sometimes, and I'm guilty, that God will work most powerfully in the large events, like this, or big conferences back home in New York, or in the talk that takes us days to write, or what have you. But God's grace does not come from our human effort. There's a great story about a major talk that Cardinal O'Connor gave at a pro-life conference where thousands of people were there. So he took a lot of time and put a lot of thought into it. And, he was talking about conversion and everything. And afterward, this man came up to him and said, I can't thank you enough. What you said really touched me, and it's going to change my life. And Cardinal O'Connor said, oh, what was it that I said? And the man said, remember when you said you need to turn over